Right now, on to the point. A school district in trouble with painful cuts to come.
The decisions will be hard, but that doesn't mean we aren't up for this together.
How this could impact students. A fierce debate over a new way to tax motorists. The bill that aims to study replacing the gas tax as the state moves toward clean energy vehicles. A record number of Californians are registering as independents. Why these voters are ones that candidates can't ignore.
1 minute they're sad, the next minute they're angry.
Immigration raids and protests making headlines. And the hidden toll on kids. How parents can help children feel safe. The Sacramento City Unified School District is heading toward a state and county takeover if it doesn't solve a budget deficit of at least $51 million. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alex Bell. District leaders saying the solution will be painful. I want to bring in ABC10's Becca Hobegger, who is joining us live in studio with continuing coverage of this story. Becca, what does this really mean for students?
Well, district leaders say they're doing everything they can to minimize impact to student learning. But even the best case scenario to avoid a receivership and a so-called state takeover, well, that will come with some severe cuts.
The timeline is crunched. The decisions will be hard, but that doesn't mean we aren't up for this together.
Tara Jean is president of the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Trustees. The district is facing a deficit for this current school year of at least $51 million, according to a district report published in December, and a deficit the year after that. The exact and most updated numbers will be presented to board members at their Thursday meeting.
So we're now sitting here going, it's February. We have to cut millions of dollars for this school year, and we're not sure what that number is, and millions for next school year, and we don't know what that number is. And we're in the middle of budget development. And the reduction in force process has a March 15th deadline. So the frustration and the urgency is incredibly palpable right now, I think, for everybody involved.
Urgency because if the district doesn't find ways to close their budget gap by the end of June and runs out of cash, it will need an emergency loan from the state, authorized by the legislature, and then the district will go into receivership. That's something only 10 districts have done in the past 35 years, according to the California Department of Education. The Sacramento County Office of Education, SCUSD, would handle that receivership. Currently, SCUSD is already helping Sac City Unified try and avoid becoming insolvent by providing hands-on financial advising. The specific cuts aren't yet clear, but will include reassignments, furloughs, and spending freezes. Jean says trustees need the latest numbers.
Our number one goal is to keep cuts away from the classroom and students' learning environments as much as possible. I have a feeling it's going to be very, very difficult because right now, the unrestricted part of our budget is 90+% in personnel, which means if you're going to make cuts, personnel are going to get hit.
Dave Gordon, superintendent of SCUSD, wasn't available for an on-camera interview, but told me that closing schools is not likely to happen since the disruption to students is huge and the savings aren't that much. He also said going into receivership is an extreme worst-case scenario he and everyone involved want to avoid, in which the district superintendent would be removed, the Board of Trustees would lose their authority, and he and state leaders would agree on an appointed trustee to lead the district until it recovers financially, a process that could take years. I asked Jean, who has been on the board for 3 years, how did the district get here?
I am convinced this is a system where no one person is at fault, and there are no excuses for where we are, but there are reasons. And by looking at those reasons and saying, how do we start changing that? And by looking at the roles each of us play and say, how does each one of us get better in our roles? I believe we can work through this together.
She says the board is moving forward transparently and with a data-centered approach.
The district told me today in an email, in part, this coming Thursday, staff will provide the board with an update on implementing the fiscal solvency plan, and we expect to show significant progress toward closing the deficit. ABC 10 will continue following this.
All right, Becca, thank you. Capitol Public Radio's former general manager and chief financial officer appeared in court today as he faces felony charges. Those charges do include embezzlement, grand theft, and forgery. The Sacramento County District Attorney's Office says Phineas Reyna Jr. diverted funds for personal use between 2016 and 2022, totaling to $1.3 million. He will be back in court on April. Cap Radio told ABC 10 in a statement that Reyna's arrest last week was a, quote, full circle moment. At the state capitol today, a study over a potential new mileage tax for California drivers is sparking fierce debate. Last week, the Assembly passed a bill to keep a committee going. ABC 10 State Matters political reporter Jenny Hubb breaks it down for us.
And so your belief seems to be that all road users should pay their fair share, right?
Yes.
Democratic Assemblymember Lori Wilson, author of AB 1421, the so-called mileage tax bill in the hot seat, says that is the reason for her legislation.
And when it comes to our declining gas tax revenue and our transportation infrastructure, we're not quite there yet. And so we need to get quite there.
Declining gas tax revenue, with California working to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045, in part by increasing zero-emissions vehicles. The gas tax is set at just 61 cents per gallon, the highest rate nationwide.
How do we then do a transition? Like, what does that look like? How do we build the infrastructure?
That conversation ongoing since the 2010s, with the establishment of a road usage charge technical advisory committee tasked with seeing if that tax replacement would be doable.
A vehicle would pay based upon the amount of mileage it travels, sort of like when we do toll roads.
AB 1421 requests an extension of that committee until 2035 and for a study to be completed for the legislature by January 2027 to
determine whether or not, first, it would work to replace the gas tax eventually, and secondly, how it would actually be implemented. For example, privacy concerns, having your vehicle actually tracked mile for mile.
That's where Republicans say they're concerned.
A proposal becomes a study, that becomes a temporary fee, that becomes a permanent tax. It is a tale as old as time in this building.
There's even effort by Republican Assemblymember Greg Wallace to put the guarantee of a no double tax in writing. Insurance, the mileage tax, replaces the current gas tax and won't cost Californians more. Bill co-author and Assembly Majority Leader Cecilia Aguiar Curry had a three-word response.
Read the bill.
As for Governor Newsom, his press office responding to Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley on X in part, quote, "Bro, you used to be in the legislature and you don't know how a bill becomes a law? There is no new mileage tax here." Whether you call it a mileage tax, VMT, or road usage tax, at the end of the day, the goal?
Generate a similar amount of money for the upkeep of our streets and highways in the state of California.
Jenny Ha, ABC 10.
Republicans also argue California already has sufficient road investment through SB 1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act back in 2017, which invests over $5 billion annually into state and local infrastructures. All right, let's get into voters. With the high-stakes midterm elections approaching, a record-breaking percentage of voters nationwide are now identifying as independents, and that's according to a new poll. Take a look at this. A record 45% of voters have allegiance to no political party, a new ABC News Gallup survey found. The poll showing there are more Democratic-leaning independents than Republican-leaning ones, which is a major change from 2024 to 2025. In California, independents are nearly tied with Republicans, a shift 2 decades in the making. So for every 6 Republicans, there are about 5 independents. And Democrats, still outnumber both groups by a lot, about twice as many as either one. All right, still a lot more news to get to right after the break. A train derailment knocks out power to more than 17,000 PG&E customers. What's next as most power is restored? Then out in Washington, there is still a standoff tonight. When will the House vote as a partial government shutdown is continuing?
As expected, a little taste of spring this week. Tomorrow, that continues sunshine and some mild temperatures. But next week, we're back talking about some rain chances. Look at the forecast after the break.
But first, another headlines tonight. Former President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton will testify in a congressional investigation into the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, according to Reuters, who spoke to one of the Clinton staff. The decision could hold off a planned vote to hold the 2 Democrats in contempt of Congress, which could lead to criminal charges. The death of Alex Preddy, who was shot by federal immigration agents in Minneapolis, has been ruled a homicide. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner released the findings today, saying the 37-year-old nurse died from found multiple gunshot wounds and notes Preddy was shot by law enforcement officers. By definition, a homicide ruling means the death was caused by another person, but does not determine if a crime was committed. And Today Show host Savannah Guthrie's mother is missing in Arizona. Investigators are now calling it a possible abduction. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was last seen in her Tucson area home on Saturday. Investigators believe the abduction happened in her sleep early Sunday morning. They say they found evidence that suggests a crime had been committed. They would not say what the evidence is. Welcome back in. Some buildings in Stockton, including the courthouse and businesses, closed, and they were without power after a train derailed, causing a power outage. Union Pacific says around 9 a.m., 3 cars derailed in their Stockton rail yard, knocking over a power line. Now, the derailed train hit what PG&E calls a transmission line in the area, knocking out power for over 17,000 people. It happened in the area of Clayton Avenue and El Dorado. About a dozen Stockton Unified schools lost power, but they were able to stay open despite that outage. The county courthouse had to close, and the county administration office had to reduce some services due to the power outage. At this time, power has been restored to most customers. Let's get things over to meteorologist Brendan Minchef with a look at the weather. Very beautiful and nice and warm out this weekend, too.
Yeah, definitely this taste of spring this week. The groundhog said 6 more weeks of winter, but for us in Northern California, this week is all about spring. 65 in Sacramento, 66 in Stockton, 67 in Modesto, 71 in Vacaville and Fairfield. Temperatures in the valley 5 to almost 10 degrees warmer than normal this afternoon. And if you liked that, well, we've got a lot more of that the next couple of days. We are just barely getting into the 50s now in the valley. 59 in Sacramento, 55 in Elk Grove, 60 in Stockton, though, 61 in Modesto, and mid-30s in the high country. Looking towards the Tower Bridge, 59 degrees, very similar to where we were at this time yesterday. Temperatures will fall through the 50s, then through the 40s. I think mainly clear skies, though, even until we get to about midnight or 1 o'clock. Then we'll start to see some fog developing. Some of this fog will be dense as we start Tuesday morning off near 40 degrees in the valley. You see the fog development kind of holds off until we're deep into the overnight hours by 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, some patchy dense fog. I think the thickest of the fog will be down in the San Joaquin Valley. That's where a dense fog advisory is in place until 10 in the morning. Tuesday afternoon, sunshine and mild temperatures, about 54 in Truckee, 51 in Tahoe, 71 Nevada City, 69 in Vacaville, 68 in Fairfield. Parts of the mother lode, though, upper 60s to about 70 degrees, mid 60s in the San Joaquin Valley, mainly because of that fog earlier in the day, but with less fog in the Sacramento metro area, we'll get a little bit warmer. So I've got some mid to upper 60s, about 67 in Elk Grove, 66 in Sacramento, and again, upper 60s to 70 out in Vacaville and Fairfield. High pressure building this week. That's what's keeping us pretty warm, but it finally moves out. And as we get to the start of next week, we'll be watching for this system to drop into Northern California. So next week, we could see some rain and snow coming back to Northern California. We're just monitoring it for now. Be sure to stay tuned, but there's pretty good model agreement. Just remember, there's still time for change. Likely cooler, likely wetter as well as we move into the middle of February. Not this week, though, Alex. Still feeling like spring.
All right, Brendan, thank you. Right after the break, President Trump calls out big wins on the economy and housing, but some of the numbers don't add up. Tonight, we separate fact from fiction, and the latest immigration raids are affecting kids' mental health. Coming up, steps that parents can take to protect them. The U.S. government is still in a partial shutdown. Hours before Friday's deadline arrived, the Senate reached an agreement on a funding bill. However, that deal is not official until the House votes on the matter, and it appears there are still some things that definitely need to be worked out here as we continue to cover this. Tomorrow, the House is expected to vote on the funding package that passed through the Senate last week. The legislation backs most government agencies through much of the year, except the Department of Homeland Security, which will only get funded for 2 weeks while lawmakers work to reform DHS's immigration operations. Now, this partial government shutdown is expected to last until at least tomorrow, while Washington, D.C. tries to come to, some sort of agreement here. Now, the partial federal government shutdown is not expected to disrupt tax season, at least not this week. The IRS saying its nearly 75,000 employees will continue working through February 7th. The agency says staff members are being paid through the Inflation Reduction Act. What happens after February 7th is still unclear. During last year's record-long shutdown, the IRS initially kept all employees working. However, the agency had to furlough more than 34,000 staffers a week into the impasse. President Donald Trump today said that he will reduce tariffs on Indian goods in exchange for their promise to stop buying Russian oil. Trump said that he spoke with the Indian prime minister, who agreed to replace Russian crude imports with oil from Venezuela and the United States, but that shift could be difficult. Under the deal, tariffs on Indian goods will drop to 18%, down from 15%. The White House says an additional 25% tariff imposed last August would be fully removed. President Trump held his first cabinet meeting of the year last week. The meeting focused on the economy, housing, and energy. During the meeting, the president talked about his administration's accomplishments. The Associated Press broke down a few of those claims, so let's take a look at them. First, on housing, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner, stated December home sales rose sharply to their strongest pace in 3 years. The Associated Press says that this overstates what's happening in the housing market. The National Association of Realtors did report that the seasonally adjusted annual rate of home sales in December rose 4.35 million units. That's nearly the highest in 3 years, but the sum was just 1.4% year-over-year increase. The president also addressed the California wildfires. Specifically, he talked about the local permitting for rebuilding homes that were destroyed last year in the Los Angeles fires. President Trump says they have been unable to give permits. There are like 3,000 houses being built out of thousands and thousands. But according to Los Angeles County and city data, about 3,100 permits have been issued within the Palisade and Eaton fire zones as of last Thursday. We know that fewer than a dozen residences have been rebuilt, but there are 900 homes that are under construction. Governor Gavin Newsom also responding to Trump on social media, saying that local officials are moving at a fast pace. Newsom called the Trump administration to approve the state's $33.9 billion disaster aid request. And new tonight, all officers on the ground in Minneapolis must wear body cameras. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem made the announcement today just on social media. The news of the body cameras comes as Minneapolis has been the site of intense scrutiny over the conduct of immigration enforcement agents. And news of immigration enforcement action is everywhere. It's on your television, your phone, and it's likely showing up on your child's social media feeds. Experts warn that constant exposure to these updates, especially when violence is involved, it can really take a toll on a child's mental health. Maribel Gonzalez shares practical tips to help parents and educators talk with children about these difficult topics in a supportive and also an age-appropriate way.
Immigration raids and protests in response are making nationwide headlines. Health experts say images like these can be overwhelming for children who may be privy to them even when parents don't realize it.
In the age of social media, kids are oftentimes learning information through their friends or things that they see on the website or overhear in the news.
Clinical psychologist Dr. Natalie Cruz explains how parents can spot if their child may be experiencing stress.
1 minute they're sad, the next minute they're angry, and maybe it goes beyond kind of what is typical for the teenager.
Having an open and honest dialogue with kids is key.
Hey, Johnny, there's been so much happening in the news lately. Have you heard anything about immigration or ICE? Start open. Start with a wide kind of question and see where that leads you.
For families and communities impacted directly by immigration enforcement,
there's a whole lot of children. They're simply not going to school right now because the fear that's happening in the community is just very real.
Experts say if you feel you may be targeted by ICE, having a contingency plan helps children feel secure amid uncertainty.
A child benefits from knowing what would happen to them, who would take care of them.
And for those not directly impacted,
focus in on the areas that the child and the family do have control over.
I'm Maribel Gonzalez reporting.
Next, a look at what we're bringing you tomorrow, an exclusive ABC 10 interview on the crisis facing Sacramento's Ukrainian community. Well, the Sacramento area is home to one of the country's largest Ukrainian populations. Coming up tomorrow at 6:30 on To the Point, some members of our local Ukrainian community say that they're really facing a crisis. Those who fled that war in Ukraine with support from U.S.-based sponsors now say that months of delays in their work permit approvals have cost them jobs. The founder and co-chair of Ukrainian American House, which is based in Roseville, says many in the Ukrainian community are now at a crossroads with no way to earn a living.
Some of them received the renewal 2 months late, 3 months later. Some of them just no renewal, and they don't have any support line. They submit all documents, they provide everything, they paid extra fee. There is no system to speed up.
In an ABC 10 exclusive, anchor Laura Painter sat down with local Ukrainians looking for answers and also advice from Congress. It's a story that you definitely don't want to miss. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.